Hello and welcome to week 3. We're going to have a wee look at assemblies now. So let's jump across to our part and we will see SA-01 subassembly and GA-01 general assembly. You can see the difference between a subassembly and a general assembly is the complexity. So, in order of hierarchy, we have parts at the bottom that are the most discrete components of a overall general assembly. Those parts can then, within themselves, join together to form a subassembly. Those subassemblies can then form together, create a general assembly. So, it's a 3-tier sort of system there. But you can still have subassemblies within subassemblies. There's no real limit on how many layers you have to have or convention there. You just do it in a way which seems appropriate and logical for breaking the components up. Subassemblies can be fantastic because it means that you can work on a relatively small file size, you're less likely to crash your computer, and then you can combine those subassemblies into a general assembly to check things like clearances and fit. We can see in this section view how nicely all these parts are fitting together. So let's start off with subassembly 1. I'm going to come into SolidWorks and I'm going to create File, New. This time, for the very first time, we're not going to click Part, we're going to click Assembly, and we'll say OK. Now, it's going to look very similar to a part. The main difference is we can't extrude geometry easily, I should say. But we can import our parts and place them inside this assembly space. We've still got 3 planes, we've still got an origin. It's a very similar interface to a part, but instead of creating geometry, we're just bringing in parts, placing them together, assembling them, and then using that so that we can create drawings of overall assemblies without having to model it all in a single part. So let's begin by saving, and we're going to call this SA-01. We'll double check that against what the drawing says. That looks bang on perfect, and the description will be subassembly 1. Just subassembly. Very good. So I will come to my custom properties. I will type in description. I will typo there, and we will call this subassembly. Okay. So I'll just give that a quick save, and I'm going to select Insert Components, which should make this window appear. The first thing I'm going to do is hit Browse, and I'm going to grab my formed bracket. I'll say Open, and now I should see it appear there. I could click and drop it, and that would just sort of drop it wherever it falls, but because this is my first component, I am going to just use this green tick, and what that will do is align the origin of the part I've inserted with the origin of the assembly, so that they're all nice and aligned, and the 0 zeros are all meeting up with each other. I'm pretty happy about that. And it also places it as fixed, which means that it's fixed in that position, which in an assembly, it's sort of quite useful to have your very first part fixed. And then we start locking other components off to that. By fixed, I mean it is locked in position. I can't move it. If I didn't want that, I could right-click the part, and I could select Float. Once that's selected, I would then be able to click and drag that part around in 3D space. I'm just going to hit undo a couple of times to go back to that fixed area. Or just get rid of it altogether. Alright, let's drop it in again. Nothing like repetition is a good way for learning. So Browse, Insert Components. Select P04, hit Open, hit the green OK button, and that will lock it down to that origin as a fixed part. Alright, now we want to insert our washer and our pivot pin as well. So I'll hit Browse, And this time I'll hold Control so that I can select both those parts, P01 and P02. And I'll drop those in. Now straight away I can see there's a pretty big difference between my washer and the washer in the new supplied drawings. Now I'm not going to go over that in this tutorial. That's the kind of stuff we do in class. And hopefully it'll give you a bit of incentive to make sure you're showing up to classes if, you know, it's not 100% on Blackboard. You know, there's some stuff you got to knit together yourself. So I'm going to start using mates to lock all this together. So all my parts are in there, but they're all moving around. Nothing's really where I want it to sit. Just clicking and dragging, it's pretty useless. It doesn't really put it where I want it. So what we need to do is use mates. Mates are very similar to relations in the way they work. You select, you know, two pieces of geometry and you create a definition between them until it's fully defined. So in this little blue box is where I select the objects I want to mate. The first thing I'm going to mate is the center of that top hole by selecting that cylindrical surface and my pivot pin. So I selected those two cylindrical surfaces. I'm going to use a concentric mate, and right now that would actually spin around. I don't want it to spin, so I'm going to say lock rotation, and I'll hit the green tick for OK. And then I'm going to select that top face and this bottom face because I want those to be touching, and I'll make sure that's a coincident mate, and I'll hit OK. And that's pretty good. That part's nice and in line, it's where I want, and now I just repeat those steps for this washer. So select the cylindrical faces, mate them, and then select the top face of the washer, the bottom face of the formed bracket, the two faces that touch, to sort of capture that, and hit OK. Now I'm going to hit the green tick and have a look. I'm still underdefined, and I can see what's underdefined here because it will appear with this this minus sign next to the part name. So if I want to figure out how it's underdefined, typically the best way is just to grab and twist the part. So that's not really moving in any unusual way. If I think that might be incorrect, I can hit rebuild to rebuild the part, and I'll see that once I've done that, it's had another think, and it's gone, no wait, P01's fine, it's fully defined, but P02 is still underdefined. And I can tell you why that is. It's hard to see, but that part is still spinning. And that's because we didn't lock the rotation of the concentric mate. We can see here under our mates tab, the concentric mate that's been locked has a solid center, while the one that hasn't been locked has an open center. So what I'm going to do is right click that mate and say lock rotation. And now it's all fully defined. So I'll hit save. And that is in fact SubAssembly 1 ready to go. So that was really quite quick. The key is to make sure it's fully defined. You've got 3 parts in there. You know, and then you're hot to trot. So let's hit save and you're done.